So that now we're streaming on YouTube and other places. So agile roadmaps, that's what so that long digression, we're talking about agile roadmaps today. And ask everybody to rank your interactions with the business owner. Looks like most of us are kind of in the average. Um, Kind of in the average area. So somebody's mentioning having them cooperatively validate. I did do some of that. I ran different AIs on the information that had another one look at, say, is there anything in this that seems biased or can't be supported from the links that it links to, and kind of played them back across each other from time to time, and it helped. But I still don't think you wouldn't want to stake your reputation on it unless you had actually read through everything yourself based on the few things I saw do. So most of us looks like we're kind of in the average, maybe weighting a little bit toward good or excellent, ranking your interactions with a business owner. So the reason I ask that is I'm going to give you an example of a very early roadmap. So a very early roadmap was it was 12 stories that together represented an overall goal. Each story was independently valuable, and each story could be delivered all the way to done. And here is actually a picture of that early roadmap. I think this is probably Greek here. And you might be able to tell just a little bit by looking at the picture. This was Hercules. So this was one of the early copies of the 10 Labors of Hercules. Um, Hercules, it was his roadmap to redemption. So Hercules had he was a great hero, did all kinds of things, but he also every once in a while would go just insane and kill a bunch of people around him, and then he'd feel really really bad and terrible about it. So one time when that happened, his way of like making penance for it was to go to I think I'm getting my stories mixed up. Anyway, he was told he needed to go and submit to Eurystheus, which is the king of a city there, and do whatever he told him to do. And so Eurystheus gave him these 10 labors. Um, Now there are 12 things that he had to do because Eurystheus, as the business owner, did not accept two of them. He said two of them weren't any good. I think one of them was he was supposed to clean out the stables in a day, and so Hercules rerouted a whole river to clean out the stables, and Eurystheus was like, "Yeah, that one doesn't count." So he had to do it for one. So some of the labors are he had to capture the bull of Crete, which later if you want to call him protege of Theseus, the bull evidently got loose again somewhere and was uh, terrorizing people in Athens. This picture, he looks like a pretty much normal bull. The bull would depending on what account you read, he would breathe fire and all kinds of things. But that was one of his labors, capture the bull. So it had a starting point and end point, and it was these 10 things he had to do. He also had to get the girdle of the queen of the Amazon, and in this particular version, it looks like I think that's the queen bowing there, and so she gave it to Hercules. I think in others they battled it out. But anyway, so that's Eurystheus there. Eurystheus being given the girdle, which represented power. It may have had magical things, but now one of the things that happened here is so you got Eurystheus, who he keeps having Hercules come back and give him all these things that are part of his roadmap of what he's given Hercules to do. And after a while, he starts thinking, this guy's really strong, good looking, and everything. He might unseat me. So I don't think I really want him coming into our city every single time he does something else and show people how wonderful he is. So he came up with this plan. He said, I'll meet Hercules outside of the city. But they thought, but he's really strong and kind of dangerous. So maybe I need some way to protect myself. So Eurystheus came up with this great idea that when we had sent Hercules out to kill this boar that was destroying everything. So Hercules shows back up with the boar, and Eurystheus says, "Well, I'll meet you outside the city," but he doesn't want to necessarily be, completely exposed out there. So he gets a giant jar and hides in the jar, and then Hercules comes and shows him they killed the boar, and then gets his next thing. So that's Eurystheus hiding in this giant bar. So imagine for a moment that you are doing a software demo, and what the business has asked for is seemingly impossible. And your team comes together and you manage to deliver it. So then you go to the software demo and you can't find the product owner right away because he's over in the corner hiding in a giant jar because he's afraid of the developers because he gave them something he thought was impossible and they managed to deliver it, and now he's kind of scared of them. And my point with this is that your product owner is probably great to work with compared to this, right? Oh, and after Hercules dies, Eurystheus tried to kill his children. So with that in mind, and the second question is now, how would you rate your interactions with your business owner? the person who's asking for your software, kind of, if we look back historically at this roadmap and how it went, how would you recommend, does that change your perspective on how your interactions are with your business owner now? It looks like we're averaging a little bit more toward the good side of things. Hopefully your business owner is a lot safer to work with. So just that's meant mostly in jest, but there is a wide range of what interactions can be with business owners between what they're asking for and what we're able to deliver, and kind of how that interaction works. So it looks like a lot of us are saying we're more toward with that perspective, we're more willing to say that we've got good interactions with our business owners. So if you're ever in a situation where, like, the demo's not going well, just think about trying to demo the story of killing the horrendous boar that's ravaging the countryside, and maybe it'll make it seem better. Okay, so which agile principles actually support roadmaps? Like, if we look at the agile principles, what do we see that would make us go, oh, okay, I can see why we might want to have roadmaps. So if we go to this, just go ahead, and I think you can vote for three. Choose three things that you go, this is something that I could see would be justification for having a roadmap. And there's no right or wrong answer here. I just put a few things out here. I'm just curious what principle people would most likely say would support having roadmaps. And honestly, I think some of it you could probably make a case for any of these. So don't hesitate to just pick whichever ones kind of come to your mind. It looks like most people are saying our highest priority is satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. And probably from that standpoint, if we think of it in terms of, if we want to deliver something that's valuable to the customer, we need to know what the customer wants and have some idea of how we're going to get there, and also how it works cumulatively, right? If we're delivering a series of stories, the roadmap makes sure that they all kind of work together toward a particular end. The next one we got here is delivering working software frequently from a couple weeks, couple months, preference toward the shorter time scale. Yes, knowing what you're going to do, I think can have a big, and having a roadmap to where it's kind of like, well, we need to do this, this, and this. We may find that sequencing does matter. We'll look at that a little bit about how it matters in terms of return on investment, but it can also matter in terms of, you're asking me to give you Y, but then later you're asking for X. But if I do X now, we can give you value sooner on and then give you Y. So there's all those aspects to roadmaps. So in thinking of roadmaps, let's watch. We're going to watch somebody grab a map and follow a map. And the point I have some questions about this afterwards. But this is Mr. Bean trying to follow a map. And I want you to consider, when you think of how you follow a roadmap, is your team trying to follow a roadmap kind of like Mr. Bean, to where, well, let me just show you the video and then we'll talk about it. He found an impediment.
Regarde, qu'est-ce qu'on fait?
T'inquiète pas, Pierre. Ça, c'est un anglais, ça.
Monsieur Clay, how long will you stay in Paris?
Of course, I'll be in Cannes Sunday for my premiere. Until then, I'm working on an exciting new project with this wonderful actress, Sylvie.
Sabine,
Right.
je m'appelle Sabine.
One last question, please. Monsieur Clay, s'il vous plaît.
S'il vous plaît.
We
Looks
can't
like you're
hear you.
muted.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So I like what Ian said. Like lots of team waiting for the first impediment to get out of its way on its own. The other thing I want to point out is, have you ever worked with a team that's like, here's our plan, and we're going to stick to our plan, even regardless of what type of mayhem it causes for the rest of the organization. So maybe that roadmap gets followed, but at the expense of a whole bunch of other things that are happening around it. Just because when you do have a plan, and this is, I think this is an important thing of thinking of an agile roadmap, is you have a plan for what you want to do. It's very, very useful, but it's a guiding thing to help you figure out how you're going to adapt and make sure you're still headed in the right direction. Not something to like let you just like bulldoze through everything and just cause chaos in your wake everywhere. And when we think about harnessing change for for a competitive advantage, that implies a very strong idea that we know what to do next, right? We're going to harness change for competitive advantage means we have an idea what the next most important thing is to work on, even if that thing is kind of changing. If we have no idea what the next most important thing is to work on, it's going to be very difficult to harness change for a competitive advantage. I think this is an example. Mr. Bean is not necessarily harnessing change for a competitive advantage, right? There's a wall there, something sitting there for a long time. He's just not going to make it to. It's just going to stop. If there's a dessert tray in the way, he's going to move it and cause all kinds of non-competitive advantages. So the roadmaps must support working on the next most important thing. And I think this is one of the most important things to think about with roadmaps is that we need a plan, not because we're going to follow the exact plan, but because we need to have a good way to have discussions about what the next most important thing is and recognize when it might have changed from when we made the plan. Having that written out so you've got something to compare it to, it can be very powerful. So roadmaps must avoid working on something that is no longer the most important thing. So to the extent that your roadmap allows you to identify the next most important thing, but also identify when that thing has changed, the roadmap's really helping you. If it, like the Mr. Bean, you don't realize, if like Mr. Bean, you've got, I think somebody called it tunnel vision. You got tunnel focus, tunnel vision, and you no longer you don't notice that what you're focused on is no longer the next most important thing, and you need to change and adapt, then your roadmap is hurting you. And so I think that's a useful thing to think about how you approach roadmaps and how your team approaches roadmaps. Is it helping you actually be in a position to even having a plan to make changes as you need to, or is it being used in a way that makes it where it's even harder to change? One of those is good, the other's not what you want. So we've got kind of this balancing act between the value of knowing what's coming next and then the risk of sticking to a faulty plan. And if you can make sure that you're not being pushed over to the side of the risk of sticking to a faulty plan, your roadmaps may be very, very helpful to the extent that they're helping you do what's in the green box. So if we're thinking in terms of a roadmap, and this is one of the teams I'm working with here recently, this has been a big source of discussion when they're doing their planning, that how far do you need to see into the future in your planning? Well, it's if there's a deer right in front of you in the road, that's good to know right away, right? Because you can take evasive action. But having a really, really good plan and knowing exactly where the deer are for the next 100 miles may not be as useful because that may change entirely. Maybe you're not even going 100 miles, or maybe you decide to go somewhere else. Decide to stop, spend the night somewhere, or the deer might not even be there by the time you get there. And the problem with plans that are doing things like this, where they're looking so far into the future that it's not giving you actionable stuff for today, is you may be so focused on the deer 100 miles away that you overlook the fact there's a giant chicken right in front of you in the road. I don't know if you so it's distracting you from what you need to be doing right now. If you've never seen the Hoboken chicken caper, about a giant chicken causing mayhem in Hoboken, New Jersey, I think it is. I saw that as a kid, and then as an adult, went through Hoboken for something. I was very excited to see the town that I'd see. Anyway, it's a very silly thing, but giant chicken. You got to watch out for the things that are in your way right now, not at the you don't want to be so focused on things that are 100 miles away that you miss the stuff that you need to be doing right here today. So maybe I need to know where I'm going on the road, but a very, very detail of all the deer that are on the road 100 miles from now, probably not worth the cost of acquiring that information because it's going to change so much. It's also very likely to be information that's distracting me from the giant chicken that might be in the road right in front of us. Okay, so if we know that working software is the primary measure of progress, all of our roadmaps should be done in a way that's helping us actually achieve this. That's helping us so we know that we're actually making progress. Not just saying we've got a plan and so we've made progress because we've got a plan. No, it needs to be helping us deliver working software. This is a recreation of a conversation that I actually had with someone. I said, so as you know, we really, or they said, as you know, we really have two definitions of done. And I heard that, and I was coaching this organization. I said, shouldn't delivering working software be our definition of done? Like, isn't that what should be the primary definition of done? And they responded, said, yes, that sounds good. And she said, so as I was saying, we have three definitions of done, which wasn't the point I was trying to make at all. But the reason I bring this up is it's very easy for other things to become our definition of done or become on parity with what should be our primary definition of done or primary definition of progress, which is we've delivered working software. Um, so here's an example I want to think when we're thinking about roadmaps. So if we think about all the work needs done, this is an example of rewriting a system. We've got existing functionality and then we've got new features. The reason that we're justifying actually rewriting the system is because people really want the new features. Nobody's excited about the existing functionality. But if we create a roadmap like this, where let's say we're starting over there on the left and working our way to the right, where we build a little bit of existing functionality and then build some new features and then build some existing functionality and build new features, that would be one roadmap for delivering this rewrite of the application. And when we get to the end, we now have parity with the existing functionality and all of our new features. On the other hand, if we kind of resort things, we could deliver it like this, to where we deliver all the existing functionality first, and then we start working on the new features. Um, these roadmaps will give us very different things. In the first example, we're not going to be able to go live with and even replace the existing system until we get all the way to the end. In the second example, we will have a functionally equivalent system about halfway through, and we could replace the old system and start using it and start exercising it and start working through any issues and that we have with it. So it shows it was a long time ago I made this slide. That's amazing how time is flying. But the point being that this is a trade-off we would be making if we take the top roadmap versus taking the roadmap down below it. Sometimes it can be useful to have a roadmap for things that you're choosing not to do right now. I was working with one team, and we were trying to figure out what we needed in order to go live with a new application. Um, it was a significant rewrite of something of functionality that they had today, but redoing everything from the ground up. And we were having a lot of problems in the discussion because we were like, what's the minimal viable product that we could make become our system of record? And lots of people wanted to put things into the minimal viable product, that first bucket. They wanted it in the first bucket. That when we started talking about, it's like, you know what, the system could run today without that. We could go live without that, so we don't want that in there. But then when we try to put it and say it's not in the minimal viable product, people get very upset because it was very, very important to them. So in this particular case, what we did that finally kind of broke the log jam was we said, okay, let's make sure we differentiate between the things that are actually the minimal viable products. So the bare minimum we need in order to make this thing the system of record and replace the existing system. And then let's have another bucket of saying this is fast follow. So these are things that are vitally important that we really, really need, but are just below that threshold. That we can run the system for a while without these things, and put those things in that bucket. And then over here we had the non-MVP, where the things were lower. And that process of actually kind of creating our roadmap of what we were going to work on, I found that by having that middle bucket, when we just had two buckets, it was very, very difficult to have conversations about. But by giving people a middle bucket, they now were able to say, okay, I recognize it's very, very important to me, but I know it's not MVP because we can go live without it, but I can put it in the middle bucket. So it gives me a way to show that it's important. Well, what we were doing here is basically creating just a roadmap for when we were going to do things, right? We've got the MVP, which comes first, and then we've got fast follow. That's the next most important set of things. And then we've got the things that we need, but will come later that don't meet either of those first two tiers. And this giving people, so the main reason I want to point this out is if you're ever at an impasse with trying to figure out how to prioritize things. Sometimes it's a matter of you need to give people a way to say that something is important, to show how important something is to them, even if it's not the most important thing. And if they're only given a binary choice between this is either important or not important, you'll end up with a bunch more things than important, that maybe shouldn't be there. You'll end up with a bunch of things at the highest level of priority that maybe should be in lower levels. So Agile says we need to deliver working software frequently. With that in mind, it means a roadmap that slows down the frequency of deployments is not agile. So if our roadmap is functioning in a way that makes it to where it's taking us longer to deliver incremental units of value, then we're doing something wrong. The roadmap is not supporting the agile principles. And so we need to look at that and figure out why is it that this roadmap is actually slowing us down? Are we working with things in too big of chunks? Are we creating a roadmap in little tiny pieces that don't come together till the end, so we can't actually deliver it without ending up with a broken system? All those questions are things you have to ask. Here's an example. We were writing software for a company that needed an online payment portal for trying to remember the company that this was for. Okay, so yeah, they needed an online payment portal because they had lots of customers and needed customers to be able to go in, see where the invoices were, pay the invoices, import the invoices, and then import the invoices for another system. And so they gave us a list of things they wanted, something in this order. So the first thing they were thinking is we want to show the status of an invoice, and then we want people able to pay the invoice. And then they said, oh, and then we want a way to import the invoices from the system that generates the invoices, and then we need to have a list so you can see the invoices and what was paid. So as we took what they asked for, the sequence in which they had asked for, we started kind of changing it around, and we said, you know what? Before we can really show the status of the invoice, we could build that capability, but you won't be able to use it because you won't be able to use it in the live system because there's no invoices to show. So maybe the first thing we should do is focusing on importing the invoices, because if we've got, that's really kind of fundamental to be able to exercise the next piece of things. In the example over on the left, we could kind of do those things, but none of those first two things are going to do anything or are going to be usable in the real system until we got to the point where we were able to import the invoice. So by rearranging this, we were able to come up with a roadmap that allowed them to say, okay, we're going to start by importing the invoices. We can test that out. Even if the users aren't going in and seeing stuff, they're able to start seeing how it works. Maybe we list the invoices just for people internally. We're not showing it to the customer yet, but that has some value for us because when people call in, the customer service representative who are in the system can go see the list of invoices. But it also has the ability that's all internal. So like if we're working through things and there's some issues with importing invoices, it's all something we're getting feedback internally. So the point I want to make here is both of these different roadmaps have different times between these two roadmaps. One of them allowed them to start exercising the system sooner, um, and start delivering stuff that was able to be used sooner. The other one would have pushed that off a lot longer. We wouldn't want to, like, we could deploy it with just the ability to import invoices and start exercising that. Deploying just to showing the status of the invoice with no way to bring invoices in didn't really give us the same ability to actually exercise the system. So back to our chart here. So look at this. So now we've added another thing. We've got the minimal viable, which is like a subset of the existing functionality. We've got existing functionality and new features. So look at the difference between these two. So in the top one, we build some existing functionality, and then we build some new features, and then we build something that's the minimal viable, and then some new features. And everybody gets excited about the new features because that's why they're investing in this rewrite. And we work our way through it. On the other hand, on the bottom, we build all the minimal viable, which is like the bare minimum stuff we can do to actually get the system to work. And then we build out the existing functionality. Some of that existing functionality may be things that we actually don't mind running without. It's stuff we have today, but we might be willing to live without it for a while. So with the idea that simplicity is the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, that's what we're doing here, right? We're trying to get the very simplest thing that can possibly work. And one thing I find when you've got a team and an organization that's really focused on sequencing stuff like what's on the bottom, it's amazing how much stuff can be left out or deferred until later. And those conversations can be extremely productive when you're talking with a business owner and you're saying, here's our plan of how we're going to deliver stuff. And there's constantly saying, okay, I understand the system does this today that we're replacing, or I understand it's something that you want if it's a new system. But if we got into a situation where everything was done except for this, would you want to hold up the system going live? And oftentimes the answer is no, we wouldn't want to hold up the system going live because the cumulative value of everything else together is very, very great, even if we don't have this piece. And if that's the case, then the next question is, then where should we prioritize this to make sure that we are reflecting what we've just described as being the value of this? It's lower than some of the other things, or it's not as urgent than some of the things we need for it to be in minimal viable. So that's a useful way to kind of have conversations. And then when you've got a team that's really working hard to have those conversations, you also end up start discovering like this. So you have something that starts out, and you're like, this is minimally viable piece of things. But then as the developers get in it, they're like, you know what? Part of this we can deliver without delivering all of it. And so can we break these two things into two pieces? And then let's prioritize them. Maybe they're both still valuable or very, very important for minimally viable. So we'll still deliver them just sequentially. But let's go ahead and deliver one before we deliver the other. Or in other cases, like you look at the first thing here, you may find, well, half of this is minimally viable. The other half of this is existing functionality that we would be willing to go live without. And if that starts happening, then you end up in a place where now we've been able to reduce the amount of work that has to happen before we get to minimally viable. And the point I wanted to show you here is see how this roadmap of kind of what we plan to do is being driven and reworked kind of as we find more information. And this is what roadmaps should be doing for you. If they are not facilitating this type of conversation and this sort of reshuffling to make sure that we're pushing the value of getting the software into people's hands earlier, then the roadmaps they're not benefiting you the way that they should, and it's likely that they're actually maybe making things worse because it's if they're keeping this type of conversation from happening. And then if we come through here and we're like, you know what, once we split these things up and really looked at them, maybe some of these things we decide we don't need to do at all. Um, so, this half of this story we don't need to do. This half of this one, like the minimally viable, maybe we've got something like, the login system working in this particular way. But since the system we're replacing was created so long ago, we now have some type of centralized login. So we don't need the application to do this anymore. And I've worked on systems where we did that. We had something like minimally viable. People need to be able to log into the system. We need to build out all this login functionality. And then we discovered, oh, the organization has been trying to move everybody to this new system that does this all automatically, and we can use that, and it takes a huge amount of work off our plate. So if we resort this stuff, maybe we end up with all these things here over at the end that we're saying maybe we just never do these things. Maybe we discover that. And the roadmap should be helping you have those conversations and find those things. But ultimately, a roadmap is a set of user stories. So let's think about it. If we have a set of user stories, so a bunch of things that describe how the world looks to the user, how the world looks, fiction. It's fiction about the user's world that describes how their world could be a better place in the future. So for any set of stories that we have, there's going to be an ordering that represents the maximum return on investment. Now, we may not be able to identify this with perfect accuracy, but if we've got stories like, we've got A, B, and C, and we deliver A, then we deliver C, and then we deliver B, and let's say, just for sake of argument, that gives us $5,000 worth of value, per week, per day, per month, or add as many zeros as makes sense for your organization. But there's some value associated with delivering things in this particular order. We deliver A, maybe we start using it, we deliver C, start using it, deliver B, start using it, and that delivers value in a certain way. On the other hand, if we deliver these set of stories in a different order, maybe deliver B, then C, then A, that could have a greater or lower economic impact on our organization. In this case, we're saying it's worth $1,000 more to do it that way. So same set of stories, but based on the value that they return, one way produces more value than one way will produce a greater return on investment than the other. And the point I want you to take away from here is that when you're thinking of your roadmap and say we want to do this, then we want to do this, and then we want to do this, that will produce some type of return on investment. If you randomize the order and put them in a different order, that would produce a likely different return on investment. And part of what a roadmap should be letting you do is look at these things and say, we're going to organize these things in the way that will give us based on what we know today, the best chance of the optimal return on investment. Now, this isn't something, a lot of times the value is kind of hard to know, but if you're not thinking about it, you won't notice when there's opportunities like this. So let me go back to the original statement I had here, which was for any set of user stories, there's an ordering that represents a maximum return on investment. You may not be able to find that exact maximum return on investment, the order that's like the perfect fit. But if you're trying, you can make it probably a lot better than the worst and probably a lot better than just a random one. Okay, so then another way of looking at this is for a set of stories, S. I wrote this slide when I was in the middle of reading a bunch of math stuff, so it reads very mathematically. So bear with me. So for a set of stories S, so we've got a set of stories we're going to call S, there exists S prime that represents the same sum total functionality, but contains more independently valuable stories. It's basically a way of saying we can split all of our stories up and represent the same functionality. So we've got S here that represents stories A, B, and C, and then we've got S prime, which represents A sub 1, A sub 2, which cumulatively represent A, B sub 1, B sub 2, which cumulatively represent B. So the point is we can split these things up in ways that it represents the same thing, but we're now at a smaller level of granularity. So if we look at what that looks like, we've got A, B, and C here. Well, if we split this up to where we've now got a split into two, B split into two things, and C split into two things. And then go back and apply the first thing that we just said, which says for any set of user stories, there's an ordering that represents the maximum return on investment. We now have many ways to go through this. That we now have a path through these things that we did not have before. And because of that, we now have options for return on investment that we didn't have before. In this particular case, like if we were to do A first, it starts delivering a return on investment, but it looks like, according to this thing, since we've got a bigger number than we had before as far as the return on investment, half of what we had in A is things that's a very low return on investment, and half of it is very, very high. So by splitting those things up, we've given ourselves the ability to deliver the higher return on investment stuff first and the lower return on investment stuff later. And we may also find that if we split these things up, kind of like I showed in that other chart, we may decide not to do some of these things. And we may find that we can get almost the same level of return while deciding not to do a significant amount of the work. And the point of this is these are the types of things that a roadmap should be helping you do. If you're not having conversations that are leading to this type of splitting and sorting and reprioritizing from your roadmap, you probably aren't using your roadmap, probably is not helping you. And there can be a variety of reasons for it. It could be the tools you're using. It could just be that no one's thinking about this, but it could also be because there's a perception that the roadmap needs to not change once it's been put in place. And I would suggest that if you have a roadmap that you're not allowed to change, not allowed to split things up, and not allowed to adapt, it's going to cost you a whole lot more money to produce probably far inferior software. So ultimately, a roadmap is a list of stories, a prioritized list of stories, telling you what you need to work on next. But it should have the flexibility that those things can change and adapt as you have more information. So saying, here's what we are going to do. So if your roadmap is saying, here's what we're going to do, this is the solid thing that we have to follow. That's a very different thing than saying, here is a plan or a plan of what to do next. One of these is very prescriptive. The other one is very, very flexible. So saying just here's what we're going to do, like here's the whole thing laid out, assumes you've correctly predicted the future. And I can guarantee you haven't. The bottom one, though, saying here's our plan of what to do next. Here's our plan, and it tells us what to do next, and then we're going to continue to adapt this. That assumes you only know enough to make a reasonably good decision about the next thing. And that's usually about the amount of information we have about the next thing, the next few things, maybe the next week or two, maybe the next 6 weeks product increment. But the further we get down the road, the more we end up in the thing of saying, here's what we're going to do, instead of saying, this roadmap is a planning tool to identify what we do next, which is really valuable, versus this roadmap is a layout of what we're going to do next in spite of all the information we may have. So so flexible epics can be roadmaps. I'm trying to remember what I was going on with that. Oh, I have notes on this thing. So the part of the problem with having epics, having roadmaps that are happening at the epic level, is what we looked at earlier was saying the A, B, and C. When you're at the epic level, your epics can often contain a lot of sub pieces that if you're only thinking in the epic level and not drilling into what the stories are in those, you can end up delivering stuff that's not actually the next valuable thing, the next most valuable thing. So to the extent that doing planning at the epic level helps you have a good idea and helps you plan to be flexible, that's great. To the extent that it can encourage you to work on things because they're in the epic and not the next most important thing, then it starts being counterproductive. In a lot of teams I've seen, that really do well at this, they're doing most of their planning at the story level. They use epics as kind of buckets to toss things into to say, okay, if I want to see everything that relates to this, I can go look at the epic for it. But it's not the thing that they're thinking about in terms of determining what things come next. That isn't to say there isn't a way to do it. It's a danger that you can get into if you get too focused on the epic without saying but what are we actually delivering next? So roadmaps also should not be an excuse for not being able to deliver, right? The roadmap should be giving us things that are independently valuable that we can do one at a time and say we're complete. So here were the labors of Hercules. All of these things were individual. He did it and he finished it and delivered it and then went on to something else. It wasn't like he was battling the Hydra and he hadn't quite taken care of the lion and it's showing up, attacking him from the rear while they're battling the Hydra. No, it was done, completed, and then moved on to the next thing. So if work in progress is our primary measure of progress, then we need to be working in units that actually let us deliver working software. If the software isn't doing anything, if it's doing no real work, then is it actually working? And I would say no, not really. Which doesn't mean that there's never a case where you've got something that you can't get all the way through to production. But if you're delivering units that the user can't even sit down and demonstrate for themselves, then your roadmap probably is not made up of independent stories. So when you're looking at your roadmap, say, like, are these stories like the labors of Hercules, right? Are they something that he can be given the task to start it and then he finishes it and then it's completely independent and it's done and he moves on to the other and then takes the boar to the guy hiding in the giant jar? So in summary here, Agile principles imply the need to have some idea of the next most valuable thing to work on. That's very implied in what the Agile principles say, which drives the idea of having of a need for some type of roadmap. Next point, there's an arrangement of work that produces the optimal return on investment. So whatever it is that we're working on, if we sequence those things in one way, it will have a different return on investment than if we sequence those things in a different way. Dividing stories into smaller sections can increase return on investment because it gives us more options for what we mentioned in point number 2 of arranging the work in different ways that better delivers return on investment. So roadmaps that help make teams more competitive are valuable. So if it's allowing you to better adapt to change in the market or within your organization, that's a very valuable thing. Which kind of comes with the idea that the roadmap, the idea of who was it? Was it Douglas MacArthur that said, it was Eisenhower, planning is essential, but plans are worthless. And I think that's a good thing to kind of think of when it comes to roadmaps, that the process of creating the roadmap and reshuffling the roadmap is what's really valuable. Just having a roadmap that you all agreed on 12 months ago is probably pretty useless. So roadmaps that encourage working on lower value work are harmful. And this is really important, because if your roadmaps are being used in a way that they're being used to justify working on something that everyone agrees is not the next most important thing now, even though it seemed like it back when you made your plan, now you've got a roadmap that's actively working against you as far as your ability to deliver with agility. And the final point, your customer is probably much better than what Hercules had. So, keep that in mind. If you're ever struggling with any of this, you can think of Hercules bringing that boar back to Eurystheus and finding him hiding in a bottle outside of the city. Okay, so, and this is great because we've got a smaller group today than some of the other ones. So your chances of winning a t-shirt go up. So t-shirt or sweatshirt, probably a t-shirt, unless we're out of a size, and then might end up with sweatshirt. But we'll get you something if you win. If you're in the U.S. If you're outside the U.S., let me know. I can ship books outside the U.S. faster than I can ship them other places. So let's go ahead and join this. I'll give people just a few minutes. I'm going to check out the comments here. I have not seen the giant chicken on Family Guy, but I will look that up after this to see what I may be missing. Okay, I see somebody's mentioning that the way that they're using epics might be leading to some struggle, and it's not necessarily. I just want to clarify, it's not that epics are bad to use, and sometimes that can be a really good way to kind of see the big blocks of what you deliver. If your epics are being used in a way where they provide you with a roadmap for a particular piece of functionality, and that is still getting a lot of feedback about what's the next most important thing to work on, that it can be valuable. It's not that epics are bad to use in planning. You just need to be very, very careful that they're not leading you to things that will make you work in a suboptimal way. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you were able to join. Did that work for everybody? This one doesn't actually show me how many people joined. Okay. So let's see here. First question, what labor was Hercules most focused on? Okay, so there's the question. Was he focused on all that were remaining, the one he was currently working on, or the one that would be most impressive, or whatever would scare people and make them hide in a jar? What labor was Hercules most focused on of these four things? Okay. And yes, it was the one he was currently working on. Now, because he was only being given one at a time, and I mean this is a little bit silly probably to compare it to Hercules, and he was scaring people and making him hide in a jar, or at least the guy that was giving him the instructions of what to do. But the point I want to make is for your team, they don't necessarily. If Hercules was looking at the entire list of his roadmap of what he was going to be given, everything outside of just the next most important thing would have been a distraction for him. And oftentimes that happens to teams as well. So think about how you can use your roadmaps in a way that don't detract from what is the next most important thing that can be worked on. Okay, there's leaderboard. When Mr. Bean was following his map or compass, what did he do when someone was in his way? So did he go around them, talk to them, stood there and waited, dug a hole, or none of the above? Yes, he just stood there and waited. There was an impediment, and he was just stuck behind it. And what the takeaway I want to have from this, and you can find that clip if you want to show it to your team, is if we're trying to follow our roadmap, we need to make sure that we're not following in a way that when there's an impediment, it blocks our work from doing what we're actually trying to accomplish. Um, so yes, he stood there and waited, which is the exact opposite of what we want to do. When there is something blocking it, we want to blocking our ability to deliver. We either want the team to swarm, probably want the team to swarm and try to figure out how to overcome that obstacle. But it also might mean, hey, we hit this obstacle. We need to reshuffle the next few stories that we're working on because this obstacle will go away in 2 weeks. And there's no sense us spending a whole bunch of time dealing with it. Let's go ahead and deliver a few other things and then come back to that when it's not an issue anymore. Okay, there's our leaderboard. Moving on. Let's see how we're doing time. Okay, good. How might a roadmap be harmful? So what was one of the ways we discussed the roadmap might be harmful? Is it harmful because it might encourage you to divide work into smaller pieces? Might it be harmful because it might help you know what to work on next? It might encourage you to work on lower value work, or it might make you look at agile principles. Which one of those might be harmful when it comes to roadmap? So yes, a roadmap might encourage you to work on lower value work if it makes you think we have to follow this plan without rethinking what's the next most valuable thing to deliver. If the plan becomes so set, you made a plan 12 months ago, and now you know a whole lot better what would be valuable to the customer because maybe the customer is telling you. Um, they're trying out what you've already given them in the marketplace, and so now things are more important. You don't want to keep following that plan if you've got better information. And sometimes roadmaps can be used that way if they're not seen as something that's flexible. Okay, we've got Ian, guess, Age, guess, Chrissy, guess, Sridhar, Jake, and JP. Okay, next question. How can we increase the return on investment? Do we switch to Waterfall, create longer roadmaps, divide stories into smaller, independently deliverable pieces, or hire Hercules as a developer? I think we definitely you need to name your AI Hercules if you're using AI to write code. I think that's definitely what you hire Hercules. So yes, divide stories into smaller, independently deliverable pieces. Because if we divide things up, a lot of times those stories, part of them are not both pieces you divide them into have the same cost, nor do they have the same value. And so it gives you the ability to more granularly deliver stuff. Now there's a lower limit, right? You get to a point where things can't be delivered in smaller pieces, but you want to make sure that you're not overlooking opportunities to actually split things into smaller pieces. And one other thing I'll mention about this is the ability to take advantage of delivering things in smaller pieces often is directly tied to how good you are at testing. When you have lots of tests in place, it's a lot easier, and you can take something really small and deliver it and prove that it works and then get it into production. That's a very, very different situation than when maybe your testing requires 12 people to work 6 weeks before you can say this thing is delivered to production. There was a group I was working with, and that's how long it took them to deliver stuff or to actually test stuff. So they only deployed once every 6 months unless there was some type of emergency. We replaced that with the ability to prove the system worked in about 2 hours. And it was a total game changer because now they were able to drive these smaller, independently deliverable pieces. And one thing I think that's unique today that we have that I think it'll be interesting to see how people are able to take advantage of this. But if your company is looking at starting to trying to use AI, I would recommend one of the very first places to really invest some time in that is in your testing, using AI to help create tests. Now, you still need people that really know what they're doing to help drive the creation of those tests. But there's a couple things that AI does that makes it that I feel makes it uniquely suited for creating tests for your organization. So or for your application. So one thing is AI is usually really good at running tests. My experience with it, running tests, running really targeted tests, and getting feedback. I've had some things where I was using Selenium, so there was some flakiness to it, and I kept running it. And I tell AI, run these tests 5 times and tell me which one's the most flaky, or run it 10 times or 100 times, tell me which most flaky. And it would do that, and then we'd go in and say, the AI would go in and say, what is making this fail and how can we make it more robust? And a lot of times we find, okay, well, it's the data setup. And that's one thing AI is great at, is creating lots of data for the setup. I'm holding you all in suspense, right, to see who won here, but getting the data set up right, or writing some code that gets the test into the right functionality for doing things, or just simple things of, hey, we were trying to get the test to work like this seems flaky, let's try this other way of accessing the information. We'll pull the results out of the database instead of just doing it in the UI, because we have somewhere else that tests the UI, and that particular piece Selenium seems to break or something. So all those things, if you are looking at using AI in your organization, I would highly recommend that if you're trying to do some proof of concepts and stuff, and you don't have really good testing, that is a very, very good place to start. And it's also a safer place to start because if you're not actually messing with the code of the application, it gives you a chance for people to learn how to use AI effectively without it being injecting a bunch of code into the application that maybe you don't understand. If you have a test that starts being flaky, that usually is a lot less. The consequences are usually a lot lower than if you have the application that you deployed a bunch of code that's starting to act up. Okay, leaderboard. Oh, do I have two more questions? Okay, yes, one more question. So Ian's in the top spot. Let's see, one more question here. According to this talk, what might happen if you're focused on deer 100 miles away? What might happen if you're focused on deer 100 miles away? The flux capacitor might overheat. You might get a speeding ticket. You might accidentally listen to polka music, or you might miss the giant chicken right in front of you. And the point of the question, yes, the giant chicken. And remember, the point of that was just the further out you're focused, if it's consuming all of your attention, you may miss things that are right there that you need to be paying attention to right now to adapt. And the winner is Ian. Good job, Ian. Okay, so Ian, I think you are in another country. So I will,
It's okay. You can go on to number 2.
number 2. Well, I'm not sure. He may be in another country too. Actually, Ian, I will send you a book though. I can get you a book pretty easily. Would you like a copy of my Agile book, or have I already sent you one, Ian?
I haven't received anything from you.
Okay,
I'll
well,
ping you later.
send me your address, and I'll get a book headed your way. That's an easy thing to ship overseas, so I'll do that. So congratulations, everybody, for participating. And let's see, the scores were pretty close, but Ian had a little bit of an advantage there. So probably faster clicking. Or Switzerland has really good internet right now, so it's really fast. So thank you all for coming. I will. I'm going to stop the streaming here, and I will stick around if anybody wants to talk about this, talk about AI, talk about what I mentioned at the beginning. Happy to stick around and chat. But thank you all for coming, and should have some more things scheduled. I'm reaching out for some speakers. Oh, that's the other thing I would mention. If for some reason there's somebody that you're like, man, this person would make a great speaker for the Agile Lunch and Learn, please ping me. Send it my way. I'd love to reach out and see if we can get them here. So DW, did you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Mark, for another fantastic presentation. You do these things so well, man. I always look forward to getting on the call with you because I know I'm going to learn something. Was curious, did you start your sessions for AI? I know you had polled a number of us and sent a nice letter out asking if we wanted to be in a kind of a
Right.
cohort.
So we did
experiment.
kind of the experiment thing. We did 3 sessions. They were all just the same thing last week. It was a $10 thing showing how to use AI to create workflows that you could then, like an AI workflow, to create a workflow that you could then pass on to some of a like a standard operating procedure or way to solve something. So yes, those were last week.
Okay.
It was more well attended than I had expected. So we're looking at doing some other things kind of in that vein. Is that what you're asking about? Like what types of
Exactly.
things
Yeah,
might
I was
become? Okay.
curious. And since I missed it, I'm hoping that, since you got such a good response to it, that you'll be doing it again or doing something similar or something.
What I'm looking at trying to do, and I'll probably do that same thing again at some point. But what I'm really trying to do is see if I can find a cohort of, maybe 10 to 30 people that are interested in doing kind of a deep dive on that every week, of looking at how to use, mainly trying to make sure that people develop the skills they need to recognize where AI is useful and where it's not. Because if as we have people laid off, and it gets blamed on AI, which I think a lot of the layoffs are more of, we need to downsize. If we say it's AI, then our stock price will go up. So some of that may not be entirely legitimate, but I think there is some legitimacy there driving some of that. But if organizations are looking for ways to use AI to replace people, I'm looking for a cohort of people that are like saying, I want to be the one that they have to keep because I'm the one that knows how to. The example I had was work on the tractor, right? The person, there were people whose jobs were replaced when the tractor came out. And then there were people that learned how to work on the tractor, and you had to keep them around because you needed them even more now than you needed them before. So
Exactly. Yeah.
that's
Makes
that's what
perfect
we're
sense.
that's what we're looking at trying to do. It will be a paid thing, and not everybody's going to want to do it, but and we'll keep doing the Agile Lunch and Learns as well, and some stuff will feed over. But
Mhm.
trying to get something set up with some forums and a lot more interaction so people can kind of share. So kind of like a mastermind group coaching type thing. So be watching for that. I'll probably be looking at starting that here sometime pretty soon.
Okay. And then just to follow up to that one, the one that just went through, was it kind of by chance, was it recorded, and would you be willing to sell it for like a $5 or something like that? So we could take a look at it and,
So
kind of work through it.
I didn't record any of the live sessions, and usually when I'm working with people and we're talking through our actual organization, I don't usually like to record those because I want people to be free to talk and not like, oh, this person, that
Oh
type of thing.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. It
but
makes sense.
I think that is a good idea, and I've got a series of those. I may go ahead and put them together and actually make a recording. And it'd probably be more interesting to watch a recording that's been edited down for you to do something and then stop and you work on things. So that's a good idea, and I've been considering do that. And so thanks for the vote for that. We may put together something where we've got a recording of it coming up here pretty soon.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good, great feedback. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Any other questions? Hey, thanks for sharing that, Ian. I will try to check that out. That looks, I do not know him, so that may be interesting to see. And I'm not sure if the opening credits were from Mr. Bean's Holiday. I don't remember where it was from. I think that's right, but I may be wrong. Any other questions, thoughts, aggravations, or anything else?